Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend.
This is Ed Rosa, bon vivant, professional simpleton, and you can check out my and our work on youtube.com at Toothless Richard Productions. This is Gateway Cinema, Episode 6, Classical Style, and we're talking about Sweet Smell of Success.
All stories involve rules that govern how a story is told. Movie stories have an additional set of restrictions because they depend on sight and sound to foster audience sympathy. When movies were new, in the 1890s and early 1900s, movie stories had a hard time working through the technical demands of the new medium, with the result that movie stories were sometimes hard to follow. By the 1920s, though, a storytelling method was established and affirmed, and that method is classical Hollywood style. Clarity is the main feature of classical style, which seeks to define a problem faced by a person in a place to see what happens next. There is a beginning, middle, and end, and each part of the story must inevitably lead to the next. The rules of classical style are many, but the affect is always the same. Audiences emotionally invest in what happens on screen to enjoy the ride. What is the story of Sweet Smell of Success?
This lowly, unscrupulous press agent, about him trying to basically claw his way to the, top of the New York art and social scene by crawling up the ass of the most popular and celebrated gossip columnist of the time, J.J. Hunsaker.
And that's Burt Lancaster.
Yes. Yeah, and Sidney Falco is Tony Curtis, who's the unscrupulous press agent.
And what is the conclusion of this story?
The title of this film, Sweet Smell of Success, is a clever euphemism for what should have been the real title of this film, The Rank Stench of Assholes, because everybody sucks. There's no good in this world.
There's one small note of good, and this will clarify a matter of how classical style works, and the small note of good is that an important secondary character is the younger sister of J.J. This is a woman named Susan, played by the actress Susan Harrison, who escapes from the negative influence of her brother and presumably has a chance at some kind of a happy ending. You summarize this movie in a way that I think is really useful. In 1957, when this movie is released, Burt Lancaster was then perhaps 13 or 14 years into his movie career. Mm-hmm. He was among the greatest sort of celebrities, the greatest stars of his time.
Totally.
And through his weight, along with his talent agent, a few years before, he had greenlit and produced the Academy Award winner Marty, and this was a kind of a vanity project. It follows the marker of having the lead talent be inside of the work itself, but here, he takes a back seat. You're correct. Sidney is the lead.
Yeah.
And I emphasize that because a classical style story, of which this is a great example, depends upon a protagonist, maybe an ensemble sometimes, but a protagonist facing a problem who makes a choice, and a set of dominoes fall.
Right.
Every one of those leads to an ultimate choice, usually a test of some sort of courage, whether moral or physical, and a result. In this movie, the result is nothing but a bummer. Sidney does not attain what he wants.
Nope.
But he does finally exhibit moral courage by resisting the pull and influence of J.J. He's the villain. He is a kind of a devil figure. So it's counting Burt Lancaster against type, playing a really awful person. It's letting Tony Curtis be the beautiful young man that he is, fast-talking, peppering everything really, really quickly and moving through the scene. But he finally, in the end, does the right thing, and he's punched. He's beaten to a pulp by the police.
Yep. We
presume he's going to be arrested for fraud of some sort or other. He is done professionally, but he saves the girl and her out, and thus Susan escapes. That's the arc of the movie. A further thing to realize is that most classical-style stories are divided into the three-act structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
We could trace this movie, and it very carefully lays those points out when we observe Sidney leaning into a choice. There's lots of little choices that happen every few seconds, depending on who he meets, while he's glad-handing people and attempting to rise his career as a publicity agent. But the big steps have to do with the way he's trying to suck up to JJ, who further dangles the carrot farther and farther away from our lead, never allowing it to come true. Mm-hmm. And I know this was your pick for our series. This has been on my list of things Garrett should see for more than 30 years, and it is a brilliant movie. I ate a meal while this movie began, and then I was very careful to put my utensils down quietly so I could hear every last bit of dialogue. Yeah. It is so richly written. How did you first encounter this movie? What was your evolving reaction to it? Because I believe you've seen it multiple times. So take me back into the Wayback Machine. Take me back, Ed. When did you meet this thing?
You know, as like a music guy, I always pay attention. Like I always want to know what the people that I like. Like if I go to a show, I get there as soon as doors open because unlike most people that go to concerts who find any opening acts to be an irritant, I find that I've been turned on to a lot of cool bands by seeing who the band I'm there to see wanted to bring with them, because they're telling me, hey, we think you should check this out.
That's right. Taste does align in a certain wave of flavors.
Right. And it makes sense to me, too, that, like, well, if, you know, I mean, because there really is no output without input. So if an artist or group of artists is creating output that I enjoy, certainly I am interested to find out what their input was, because there's a chance I would like that, too. So in this case, there's a musician by the name of Mike Patton, but he's in a number of bands, one of which is called Fantômas. They put out a record in 2001 called The Director's Cut, which was basically a bunch of covers of pieces of film score, sort of reimagined, but also very, very authentic, like very true to the source material, just done in the Fantômas idiom. So that turned me on to the fact that this guy, who I'm a huge fan of, was also something of a cinephile. So then another one of his bands, Tomahawk, this is probably... Oh, this album might have come out even the year before The Director's Cut. So there's a song on that album called Sweet Smell of Success. And there's another song on that record called Laredo, where sort of the refrain is the cat's in the bag and the bag's in the river. So... okay, I want to see every movie that they put on this Director's Cut album. Godfather, Cape Fear, The Omen, Spider Baby, Charade, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, a whole bunch. There's like 16 or 17 or whatever.
Wow.
But the point is, finding out that on his other band, he's got these two references to this film. I was like, okay, well, I will add that to the list of things that this guy that I likes that I should check out. And that's how I came to this originally. It's funny because this is totally a noir, but it's not kind of the, you know, traditional kind of, you know, femme fatale, somebody who's good finds himself on the wrong side of the tracks by accidentally killing somebody, or some kind of insurance fraud scheme gone wrong. Like a lot of noir, the dialogue is very stylish.
My right hand hasn't seen my left hand in 30 years.
I'll do it, JJ. Don't get me wrong. In for a penny, in for a pound. I'll go through with it. But stop beating me on the head. Let me make a living.
Sidney, what you promised, do it. Don't finagle around. It's later than you think.
It has all of the stylistic earmarks of what the noir experience is. Mm-hmm. The high contrast lighting, the depth of field. It is in black and white. The characters demonstrate pretty stark moral expressions from good to evil, but at its base, it's a kind of a horror story. At least that's how I look at the story itself. The narrative functions a particular way. It's not strictly noir as a genre, it is noir as a sensibility for how the photography works, which is magnificent. James Wong Howe did a hell of a job with
Absolutely.
This. Particularly with the angles of the camera and the way that it often shoots up at things, revealing enclosure. We see roofs, we see ceilings. That's the word I'm struggling with. And there's so much location material outside in the center of New York, in Times Square and other parts in the 40s and 50s. Having lived there for a period of years, I kept trying to imagine what is now on some of the corners where the activity of this movie takes place, knowing that everything is still as populated as ever, still as busy as and exciting as ever. But I know it would have been a terrible problem back in 56 when they were making this movie to take over whole city blocks.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And put Lancaster on the corner
Right.
and put Curtis on the corner and not have people mob them and go
Right.
crazy.
Which I guess was a problem.
I can see how. I mean, it's a really sort of magnificent bit of location shooting. Noir is the style, location shooting, etc. But I believe the genre is horror. Another aspect of mature classical style, and by the middle 50s, that was a definite expression, the mature experience
Right.
of the post-classical Hollywood age, which closes out with the consent decrees of 1948. And here we have a kind of a free agency picture assembled by Burt Lancaster's company. And that company is the Hecht Hill Lancaster Productions Company, along with Norma Productions, something else he co-owned, and Kirtley Productions, something else he co-owned. They made this outside of the traditional studio system to reward their sensibilities, but they did it in a way that does the 3-act structure, etc. The master text that I believe this refers to, and that also is implicit in the classical experience, because classical style is always referring to previous examples that help the audience know what's going on. The text here is Scarface.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what I told my girlfriend when she was asking about his Hunsecker's sort of sexual predilection for his sister, and I'm like, man, he's got a real case of like Scarface.
J.J. wants Sidney to use his press agenting skills to shut down the love relationship, which is true love, between baby sister Susan and an upstart guitarist in a jazz band named Steve Dallas, played by Marty Milner.
San Diego's own Marty Milner.
Right, Marty! It's the thing that makes the whole deal go. And the reason, it appears, though not made explicit, is that J.J. wants Dear Susan for himself. So there is this incestuous thing, and that's exactly the engine that makes Scarface go. These movies are made, I think, just around 25 years apart. They're each about overbearing, powerful men who overlove their younger sister, and they don't want that younger sister to have a successful romance because they want the younger sister to be at their beck and call, and there are various secondary things around it. A distinction is that Scarface is about the lead. This is not. It is about Sidney reckoning with the lead. On top of it, a particular thing that I couldn't help but notice, and maybe this just has to do with the way I observed Tony Curtis and Spartacus a little bit later on being cruised by Sir Laurence Olivier, there's a magnificent queer text running through all of this, because the truest attraction we have in this piece, aside from Susan and Steve, who have this B storyline that's common in a classical style narrative, we've got this unannounced love affair between J.J. and Sidney.
Yeah, it really, you can read it that way for sure.
There's a lot of cigarette smoking, there's a lot of fire, man.
Well,
combustion.
And they also kind of like, at times, they almost bicker like a couple.
A press agent eats a columnist dirt and is expected to call it manna.
But don't you help columnists by furnishing them with items?
Sure. A columnist can't do without us, except our good and great friend J.J. forgets to mention that. You see, we furnish him with items.
What, some cheap, gruesome gags?
You print them, don't you?
Yes, with your clients' names attached. That's the only reason the poor slobs pay you, to see their names in my column all over the world. Now I make it out you're doing me a favor?
I didn't say
The day I can't get along without a press agent's handouts, I'll close up shop and move to Alaska lock, stock, and barrel.
James Wong Howe frequently frames our dear Sidney behind J.J., so he's physically smaller, but favoring him, sucking up to him, finishing his remarks, and issuing compliments. He is a sycophant.
Yeah.
Because his goal is to do what the big great man wants, to become his equal if all goes well.
Yeah, the one particularly cringeworthy example of this is when there's a sort of a summit at the theater where Hunsaker does his radio show or whatever, between him and
Steve?
Him and Susan's love interest, Steve. Right. There's a shot of Hunsaker, standing, and to his left, Sidney's like sitting there, kind of next to him, and Hunsaker puts a cigarette in his mouth, and with this grin that I can't even describe really, Sidney busts open the Zippo and just lights his cigarette for him.
Like they're one organism.
Right. He didn't have to be asked. Like, Hunsaker doesn't be like, Sidney, you got a light. Like, no, he's just right there to light it for him.
That idea of these men being in love with each other, I don't think is original to me in any way. It's been known for decades. But it's right there in this independently produced movie that's distributed through United Artists, one of the big one of the big little studios founded way back in the silent era that outlasted these periods of time and changed their business model. And the point here is classical style is an ever-adjustable method of telling a story so long as you have the beginning, the middle, and end, you have a protagonist, and you have a conclusion that makes sense and is built from everything that's happened before, and we are released to our own devices at the conclusion of the piece, knowing the complete story has been told.
Right.
It can adjust to a different kind of protagonist, and here in the 50s, it was rare to see an American movie with a person on screen who's not white. This movie does acknowledge that there are non-white people in New York City, but they're musicians.
Right.
In Steve's band. In fact, Steve, this Marty Milner, is playing guitar along with Chico Hamilton, the named personality for his own long-lasting set of jazz bands that had different members come in and out.
This is the Chico Hamilton Quintet.
And we hear them jam a bit.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
There's good music here on screen. It's diegetic and part of the universe because we hang out in nightclubs. That's often where the graft of gossip mongering takes place for the likes of Sidney, who's rubbing elbows with people, tipping servers of various sorts to get intel that he can then report to the likes of JJ, who have these syndicated columns in the major newspapers that are published twice a day.
Right.
It's unimaginable in a world that's post-print.
We don't have gossip columnists today the way we used to, but certainly Twitter and social media has kind of taken the... We're all gossip columnists now.
That's right. The sort of fun thing about this is that you're watching... I think this takes place across around 2 physical days, and it's mostly a lot of night stuff. But the intelligence that's getting reported up by people like Sidney, and he's not alone... 2 people like JJ, he's an apex predator in this world of celebrity news and salacious spreads or whatever. He has competitors. So all this news is filtering up, and everybody's trying to land in one of the newspaper columns, in one of these big columnists in New York City that will be spread to the wider world twice a day. And they're being paid by clients, Sidney's being paid by clients, so that their businesses, their acts, their events will be reported on and therefore drive business. That's the engine.
In a favorable light.
Right.
Because he could make or break you depending on what he says.
And then insult reports, bad news reports that filter up can similarly destroy somebody, destroy a new restaurant, destroy a new Broadway show, destroy whatever fashion is coming up on the runways that season. There's even a pointed reference in this, and I think it's Sidney speaking to some of the people who are trying to suck up to JJ, that JJ tells presidents what to do.
Right.
And you have no impression that that's false by the way this movie progresses, and who, as you mentioned, there's an actual U.S. senator across the table who is being set up with a prostitute, whose pimp is right there at the table. And this is pointed out by JJ, who says, you should not do this anymore if you wish to continue. I mean, that's speaking some big truths to power.
And then the senator thanks him.
Next time you come up, you might join me on my TV show.
Thanks, JJ, for what I consider sound advice.
Go thou and sin no more.
I lived in New York City for a while, and I sampled bits of its nightlife when I could feel I could manage it, I could afford it.
Right.
That's a false statement. Nobody can afford the nightlife unless you're truly wealthy, but you can sample little pieces of it every now and then. And the sets in this, I don't feel as if they're in a warehouse somewhere. I feel like they took over restaurants.
Some of them they did. I think. Well, like the first time we meet Sidney and he's like at that lunch counter or whatever. I think that's real. The jazz club, that's a set, and the restaurant. That's a set that apparently had wild walls, so James Wong Howe could put his camera wherever he wanted. But a lot of it is actually, New York.
And I saw through a few special effects shots where I think there is a hanging photograph or there is some rear projection, but it's not like a bad illusion. It works well. And partly the black and white helps sort of paper the cracks. Yeah. But everything looks so damn good.
Yeah.
The way the camera creates this environment, the cutaways to small close-up details, the sort of language of how a scene is constructed. And this, as you say, this is a talking movie. It moves at a hell of a clip, and you really do have to pay attention. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But one of the sort of physical manifestations of classical style grammar is whoever is speaking or doing something hogs the camera. When they hand off, or there's an interruption, or dialogue occurs, or there's a counter action to what they're doing, the camera goes to that performer, and they hog the camera. You have a mid-shot, close-up, mid-shot, and there's this activity to how all of that works. It's done really well here, because frequently we're learning the relationships and the power of who's most in control, by who's literally biggest on screen because of how the camera is positioned to showcase them. It's usually JJ. Or we're learning how people are doing things against their moral scruples, whatever they may be. For instance, Sidney has a girlfriend named Rita, who's a cigarette girl in one of the jazz clubs. Her job is under threat because she won't sleep with a different gossip columnist.
Right.
Sidney wants to save her, but Sidney ends up literally pimping her to yet another gossip columnist. That'll save her job, but he's got to do this to her. When that's revealed in his home, it's deeply shadowed. You can see that she's just wrecked over this news.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite despicable behavior.
Well, yeah, because Sidney's trying to get something in that guy's column.
Right. And that would help everybody's sort of ball stay in the air, except this poor Rita becomes the playground for these more powerful men. And she knows it and allows it to happen because she's got to keep her stinking job. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got to keep their stinking job. But that's played in this very great environment where we don't need to be told, hey, listen, he is pimping his girlfriend. How awful is that? It is.
Right.
We know that's what's happening. He's making light of it, and he's charming. Tony Curtis can get away with an awful lot.
Yeah.
The way the environment is lit, we know this is all bad news.
Yeah.
That reoccurrent technique of being very good visual showcase for different cuts, different angles, to keep a visual grammar going and a pace that our eyes can track to with this whip-smart dialogue really helps this movie move along.
Yeah. If this is really what like New York was like in 1957, then take me back.
Well, I think it feels emotionally realistic, which is one of those lessons we've already sort of hopped through. I don't think that it's journalistically true to life. However, it's not far off the mark because they do take everything and put it on the street. They do take everything and go into certain buildings. They do take everything and embody the city visually and sonically by what we experience. But then there's this issue. Each of us have already mentioned how tight the screenplay is. And man, it's good. And that's by Clifford Odets and Ernest Lehman, who was getting sort of his starring role, moving himself from having been kind of a junior press agent-y kind of a person to a story writer, and eventually he would become one of the most celebrated screenwriters in the history of Hollywood. This is one of his early marks. It's a very smartly written thing. We one time spoke about the movie Brick, and how it had this hermetically sealed vocabulary and style of speech, which was awfully hard to understand, sometimes even impenetrable. I don't know if we made the connection then, but I'll make it now on behalf of this movie, Sweet Smell of Success. It operates like Elizabethan theater, like Shakespeare operates to my ear and to my eye when I read it.
Right.
I don't always know what's happening, but the flow of it takes me along.
Right. This movie, it bears repeat viewings, and when you have those, all of those bits of syntax that you might have been struggling to like figure out, they make more sense like the more times you see it. It's not as impenetrable or as irritating, even close as what I found like Brick. I don't know that people ever talked like this in real life, but for some reason it's way easier for me to just buy that people in 1957 talked exactly like this than it was for me to buy high schoolers
20 years ago
talking like that.
This movie appears towards the crumbling of the previous censorship regime. 10 years on, there would be the establishment of the production code's switch into the Motion Picture Association of America.
Right.
And we've talked about that at some length in our conversations. The reason why I point that out is in the 1950s, we still weren't into fucking shit. I'm being glib with that, but the way around it and still get your point across is a heightened use of, and you used the word earlier, of metaphor, the use of symbol, the use of figurative language and imagery that visualizes what people are considering, what they're thinking about, what they're desiring. Thus, that smoldering cigarette, big penis and mouth kind of a thing, all over this movie. It's just everywhere, and once you see it that way, the first time you can't ever unsee it after that, and then it becomes kind of a fun game of who's smoking a cigarette in this scene.
Right.
But you don't have to play it that way. You can be more literal. People just smoked more in the 1950s.
Absolutely.
People were certainly profane in the 1950s, but they're not profane in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's a cut around to reality. We're asking about whether this movie is true to the way people really would have conducted themselves in the period. I'd say, no, it's not.
Probably not.
This is the way people, even in the 1950s, if they were smart and verbal people, wished that they would have spoken, but didn't. The French phrase is l'esprit d'escalier, the spirit of the escalator. And it's partly, if I could retread everything that I've said so far on this day, from this remove, how smart I would seem.
Yeah.
If I could only then speak that way first time out. The beauty, of course, of scripted entertainment and of dramaturgy generally is you can do that.
Right. And you want to. Can you imagine, people just talking like the way I talk?
Right. An additional thing to report, my research tells me that this movie was a round box office loser.
Yeah.
There was no profit to speak of, and there has never been.
Well, yeah, which makes sense. I mean, it's really smart, and a lot of times the American film-going public isn't into smart or dark or things that sort of make you question your values or question the values of the society around you.
Because our hero here, he at one point is a pimp. At another point, he is a liar. At all points, he's trying to manipulate the romantic life of a young woman who's 19, Susan, who he favors. He doesn't have romantic feelings towards her, but it's plain that he likes her. He doesn't want something bad to befall her. And as we learn more about her beau, Steve, across this movie, the thing is, he is the foil for this entire universe. He has utmost integrity. He doesn't believe in masks or subterfuge or lying.
Right.
He's as blunt and direct and as fair as a person can be, and he's willing to back up his choices by taking the punishment that may entail. If his honesty means the loss of a job, so be it.
Right.
And that becomes part of the crux of the Beast characters' storylines that make this thing go, and it's the comeuppance that Sidney needs. Ultimately, he acts on behalf of saving Susan's life. After Steve has been roughed up because of JJ's plans, he keeps Susan from killing herself. Susan, meanwhile, has learned a lesson from JJ, and she jackknifes Sidney, but not after Sidney calls and blows the whole stack, so that Susan can finally get out from under JJ and move on. But JJ still controls everything.
Right.
And he has the police come around and beat up Sidney and jail him. So you're right, this is a bummer of an ending. It absolutely is a bummer of an ending. There are two other things that I do want to emphasize. Well, maybe three. That one of the basic premises that run through all of classical style narratives is we have to have a motivated character, we need to have a linear story, and we need to have a seamlessness of technique. The motivated character here is Sidney, and from the moment we meet him, he realizes that his ascendance into his career of choice is being stymied by the fact that JJ won't run his tips, which means his clients don't want to pay him. So he's motivated by filling that wallet. It's a sweet little note, but he doesn't want to bring his overcoat with him to go to nightclubs.
Because he wants to save tips.
Because the convention is to check in your overcoat and then tip the coat girl or boy for giving you your own clothes back. It's because money's tight, so he's motivated by making rent. He can't, and so he's got to do something about it, and that sets in motion the set of decisions that govern this story. The story is linear. It proceeds in a very logical, very laid out A to Z fashion. There is no flashback. There is no fantasy sequence. At no moment are we wondering, did I already see this scene before and now I'm getting it from a different point of view? No. Everything is perfectly linear, and the technique is seamless. The lighting is choice. The laying out of the screen geography never leaves you confused. The music of Elmer Bernstein in the background is wonderfully composed. We get that quintet's music. That's Chico Hamilton. They're great. They got a flautist. Where this all bears down on Sweet Smell of Success. You earlier made the point that it has a more accurate title having to do with the fumes of the anus. And I think that's exactly right. The whole movie takes down the role of celebrity, of influence, and the dishonesty that people use to manipulate one another and be cruel. That is its whole point.
Mm-hmm.
So what a hell of a risk for Burt Lancaster et al. To take and make people go see this, and of course they're going to be bummed out because there's nothing to root for here.
Right.
This is not saying the American project has come out of World War II and that everything's going well. It's saying that things have become bankrupt and awful.
Right. And to find out that, Burt Lancaster put his reputation and his money on the line to get this thing done that, by all rights, of course people don't love it until today. The best art is often reviled at the time of its release. The fact that this was like a passion project of his and that it's so good, it really, it enhances my respect and admiration for Burt Lancaster.
Contemporaneously, this movie that's built around a star and it's kind of a real bummer. There were a couple of other examples that were also in theaters at the same time. A Face in the Crowd, 12 Angry Men. Because Burt Lancaster was also an actor for hire, he was also at the same time in Gunfight at the OK Corral with Kirk Douglas. And this also points out something about Kirk Douglas and about Burt Lancaster. Similar personalities. They were friends, worked together several times over, I think, at least 3 decades.
They both were really anti that McCarthyism. They both were like hired, blackballed screenwriters and stuff like that. Yeah, they were
both in their way a kind of progressive voice,
right.
Willing to take positions, willing to support people who took positions. And one thing to point out, although I'm not sure how long Sweet Smell of Success was in theaters, that bit of research was difficult for me to find. At the tail end of the year, Kirk Douglas's passion project, Paths of Glory, with Kubrick, shows up. Bridge on the River Kwai is also a Christmas time release.
Throne of Blood.
So it's nothing but bummers all the way around. And I think there's something about this moment, the late 50s, for a variety of reasons, where we're watching the corrosion of what had previously been the consensus of conformity of the era.
The afterglow of our success in World War II was kind of clearly starting to wear off.
Some of our prosperity is wearing thin. We want more. We want it faster. We want it better. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. The disposability of people over and over again throughout this piece is one of the lingering images and feelings that I get that I didn't know I was going to have. You see, before you brought this to my attention, I had always heard that it's a really whip-smart script with great one-liners, but I had largely taken away the impression that it's kind of an up movie about schemers getting away with things. It is not. It's a downer of a movie about schemers not getting away with things, justifiably being ruined to a degree by what has happened, and they deserve it.
Right.
And you want it to happen to them. I felt most sympathetic by all the people they're squashing along the way.
Yeah.
Especially Rita being pimped out by her boyfriend. And Steve. He is, for me, the Garrett character that I can identify with.
Right.
Because in many of my roles in life, I am sometimes asked to be the person who will and can say no.
Right.
And have the sort of backbone to live with the consequences.
Well, and look at what happens. He has the temerity to stand up to Hunsaker like a man. And then for Hunsaker now, it isn't just about not letting him be with Susie. Now it's, we got to put him down.
This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks. I'm the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray.
I'm Ed Rosa, bon vivant and professional simpleton.
Boop boopity doo.